July 22nd, 2019, West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting. If I can have your attendance and standing to this.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Derek, can I just ask that, do you have the ability to test Ryan's microphone? It was very loud last month.
Okay.
Ryan, can you just speak into your microphone so you can see whether you're good?
Sure, testing.
Too loud. A little bit.
Yeah, that one always seems to be elevated.
You have to do the master now.
Testing.
Is that better?
Sounded better, yes.
I can sit further away too.
Okay, so just a reminder to silence your cell phones and other devices. I also want to make sure, because this is the second month with our new conditions for public comment, I would like to encourage you to turn to the back of your agenda so you can see the information regarding our rules. So a notice to all members of the public in attendance that they may be recorded via audio or video by other members of the public. As you know, the board recently adopted Resolution 11-2019 establishing regulations for board meeting, public comment, and participation. Per the Sunshine Act, only those agenda items in which there is a motion, second, and a vote will be allowed public comment. Public comment for items on the agenda and not on the, Public comment for items on the agenda and not on the agenda shall be limited to 2 minutes per person. West Goshen Township residents, property owners, and business owners are permitted to offer public comment. Audience members who become disorderly or who do not abide by these rules may be removed from the meeting room. Thank you for your compliance. Okay, the first item are the reports for the month of June 2019. Lieutenant Justin DeMayo, please come to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report for the West Goshen Police Department for the month of June of 2019. 2,052 calls for service, and year to date we're at 12,780. Responded to 58 alarms, 7 of which were valid. Crashes, we had 16 reportable crashes that officers responded to, 45 non-reportable for a total of 61. And we patrolled 23,816 miles. In continuation of the traffic enforcement, selective area traffic enforcement program that we participated obviously all year round. Of several of the locations we hit, some of which are just, as mentioned, is Sunset Hollow Road, Green Hill Road, Glen Avenue, Spruce Avenue, Parkside Avenue, North Five Points Road, Westchester Pike, East Stroudsburg Road, and South Baltimore Street. In the month of June, we sent several officers, as we do every month, as training. Just to name a few: the Emergency Vehicle Response Course, or EVOC as we call it, the Traffic Safety Symposium, the 2 of the ground officers that attend, Police Executive Research Forum, the NRA Patrol Rifle Instructor School that we sent 2 officers to, Firearms Training, Safe School Initiative, and Negotiator Training. Just one announcement I'd like to make. So in the month of, or this summer, it occurred in the month of June, the juvenile unit put together, composed, and presented, specifically Officer Myers, our first annual junior gumshoes camp. So what we did, we held a camp. It was over at Fernhill Elementary School. It was a prototype camp that we started that Officer Myers took the initiative to do. And we had 22 fourth grade students from Fernhill Elementary. We just used Fernhill Elementary as a test school. And the students, it was a full week program, and the students were instructed on how to document evidence, There were mock crime scenes that were age appropriate, document evidence, dust for fingerprints, pour shoe molds, and then at the end, they culminated suspects, and then ultimately solved the crime. So we got tons of positive feedback on it. A lot of parents, because we were posting on social media. We got a lot of feedback on it. A lot of parents want to know, either when or if or why they weren't at other elementary schools. Again, this was a prototype. We're going to certainly do it next year. The officers in the unit are going to build upon it, and hopefully do it at a few of the other elementary schools next year. So hopefully we'll have more than just the 1 week. And that's all I have.
A lot of fun. Is there one for the adults?
Well, we do have the program, with every spring we run the Citizens Police Academy, so that's similar to that. But these students had a great time, and like I said, we had suspects and they had a full crime scene, and I think you saw the pictures on the social media. If you follow social media, the officers did a great job.
That's great.
Thank
you for doing that. Ms. Andrea Testa, on office report.
Thank you. Good evening. For the month of June, there were a total of 38 inspections, 5 commercial use and occupancy, 7 fire blocking, 10 sprinkler, 3 framing, 5 fire alarm, 2 fire extinguisher placement, 2 fire life safety, 2 residential finals, and 2 underground fire lines. There were 7 fire calls, 1 building fire, 1 vehicle into a building, and 5 fire alarms. There was 1 underground fire line break, 2 burn complaints, 1 fire call follow-up. I attended 2 meetings, and there was 1 fire life safety complaint. The Westchester Fire Department had 22 calls for the month, and Good Fellowship Ambulance had 140 calls for the month. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. John Beswick.
Good evening. For the month of June, there was a total of 230 permits, 11 single-family dwellings, 31 building, 39 electrical, 17 fire protection, 25 HVAC, 25 plumbing, 10 roofing, 9 zoning, and 10 UNOs. There's also 10 E&S, 18 sewer tapping connections, 18 open space, and 7 road occupancies. The estimated cost of construction was $4,730,101.31, and the total permit fees were $164,763.50. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, we have 3 sets of minutes that we'd like to approve today. Has everyone had a chance to read the May 30th, 2019? Do I have a motion to approve them?
I did make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. I have a first and a second. Any public comment? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Now we'll turn to the June 18th minutes. Do I have a motion to approve these?
I would make a motion to approve the June 18th minutes. I'll second.
Okay. Any public comment about the June 18th minutes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So on July 10th, many of you may know that we had a workshop, the first workshop, that we'll hope to continue doing monthly, bi-monthly, depending on scheduling. And we do have minutes related to that event. This was a open discussion. We had 2 items on the agenda. One was to talk about sewer plant upgrades, and the other was just to talk about stormwater upgrades. But we had residents from the area that's being most affected by the Westchester University Overlay District. And so we, as a workshop can allow us to do, decided to pivot and spend time listening to those neighbors of ours talk to us about the issues that they're feeling and hearing and seeing with the potential for this one specific district that has a great deal of relatively unified neighbors and neighborhoods. So these minutes reflect what was discussed during that 1-hour meeting. And if there are any questions, obviously you can ask about that from a public comment standpoint. So do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
Make that motion to approve. I'll second that.
We have a first and a second. Any public comment on these minutes?
Is it an appropriate time to submit a letter to you all in thanks of the conversation that we had? Is that an appropriate time now?
No, it would not be now, but I'll let you know.
Great.
Ms. Ward, did you have a comment?
Yes.
Come on up.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to ask a question about that meeting. Wasn't a agenda put out beforehand? You mentioned there were 2 items on the agenda. Was there actually an agenda that was put out?
Well, I created something for the board members to use to walk us through that discussion.
Okay, just in the future, if there are actual agenda items, because I see reading the minutes that you did vote on those agenda items, so I just think it would be certainly transparent to put those items out to the public beforehand as an agenda item. And then also, I was out of town, but did access computer because I thought maybe I could watch it online, but I saw that it was not videotaped. So just in the future, if you'd consider videotaping those meetings as well, I'd certainly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so we have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to the treasurer's report. Do I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report and pay the bills for June?
Second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any public comment on the treasurer's report? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye on that too. All right, Board of Supervisors announcements. Can I start with Mr. Walsh?
Thank you. I have 3 announcements tonight. The first one concerns the Westchester University Overlay Project. Ms. Dunterbeck and myself attended the Planning Commission meeting on July the 9th, I believe it was, and then also the conversation that we had following that on July the 10th at the round table. We obviously heard considerable opinions from the residents about their displeasure with the overlay encroaching into the residential district south of Rosedale Avenue. And in individual conversations with board members, we are asking the team that worked on this, the township staff and the architect Bernadon, to take a look at revising Class 1 PUC overlay to exclude residences that are not, properties that are not currently owned by the university in the PUC 1 overlay that's south of Rosedale Avenue. And to basically take another look at that and come back to the Planning Commission and the board with an updated view as to what this piece of work could look like. Any questions from the board members on that? The second item I have is Ms. Dunderbeck and I attended a renewable energy planning workshop that was open to the public on July the 11th. It was held in the West Whiteland Township building. It was open to several of the municipalities and residents of those municipalities in the area. It was on one of those nights where there's an amazing storm, so we were lucky to get the number of people that we did, but I was pleased to see we had over 50 people in attendance. That was great. The workshop was designed basically to listen to public comments and to solicit public input about our energy future, in particular the opportunity to move to more renewable energy as we go forward. The 3 goals of the workshop were to define what a successful outcome would look like for an energy transformation, to identify community priorities for renewable energy transition, and to identify barriers to implementation of renewable energy systems. Overall, I think the participants were delighted to be able to come and be heard. The content and their input was duly noted by our consultant, Cadmus, and as we go forward, we'll be receiving the output from that. And there'll be other opportunities to engage in this process by the public as we look forward to ultimately getting the report from Cadmus in the late October timeframe. The third announcement I have regards the sewer plant. As everybody's probably well aware of the amount of rainfall that we've had, The water table is extremely high, and at our sewer authority meeting on July the 10th, the plant superintendent reported that we are seeing swings in the flows through the plant from a normal typical dry condition, which is about 4 million gallons a day, to in excess of 8 million gallons during these storm events. A lot of that extra water is attributable to two things. One is the high water table, so where we have aging sewer pipe, that infiltration seeps into the pipe and makes its way to the plant. And the second way that we get high flows is when people have their sump pumps connected into the sanitary sewer system, or they have their downspouts and gutters also connected in. That rainwater should not be connected into the system. It is against our ordinances. And for example, a single 5 or 7 gallon a minute pump, if we have 100 of those in the township connected, that's over 1 million gallons a day of water, fresh water basically, rainwater being treated by the plant. That comes at a cost to us, and it also increases the risk of sanitary sewer overflows in the system. The superintendent asked the authority to talk with Mr. Lalonde about sending a letter to all residents in the township, reminding them of this fact, that they should not have sump pumps, etc., connected into the system. I would urge you and all residents to make sure you don't have that, and please be on the lookout for this letter. I believe we're going to move forward with that. So it is important to avoid these issues that we have at the plant. Thank you.
I have one thing, and that is the appreciation for inclusion as item 20 on tonight's agenda for the historic resources discussion.
Okay, so first time I have no announcements.
Just briefly, folks, as the Parks and Rec liaison, it's incumbent upon me to tell you about some of the good events that are coming up. This weekend, we have the summer concert series continuation with the Chester County Band. These are free concerts during the community park. Please come on out. It's by the amphitheater. Also on August 10th, we have a bus trip going to Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. It's going to leave. The bus is going to leave here around 8 a.m. It's $55, I believe, for adults, $50 for seniors, and for children, which you can't beat. Just the tolls alone and the gas going back and forth. If you were to go there by yourself, it would be a lot more. So please take advantage of that. I understand there's still some seats that are available. That's August 10th, and we're leaving right here from this building. August 11th, the day after, we have the Blues Philly Magic. It's all Motown music. Once again, it's a continuation of our summer concert series. It's going to be the same place, Community Park, right down here at the amphitheater. So please come out, bring your family, have some fun. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to Township Manager's announcements.
I have none tonight, thank you.
Mr. Craig, Township Engineer's announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start with Greystone first. The access road from Pottstown Pike to Phoenixville Pike is almost complete. Just a few finishing touches on the Pottstown Pike side to be done yet. I would like to emphasize that that road is not open for public traffic yet and will not be for quite a while, but it is complete for construction traffic at this point. And we have, the developer has started constructing model homes, and as Mr. Beswick indicated, we have approved 11 building permits so far for their project and have about another 9 or so in the pipeline. So housing construction has started. With regard to stormwater management, we completed our second comment period for our TMDL PRP plans. That comment period ended July 9th. We received no comments on the plans. That information was transmitted to DEP, and on July the 13th, DEP advertised the MS4 permit extension in the PA Bulletin. That will be advertised for a period of 30 days, so as of August 13th, an advertising requirement will be complete, and hopefully our final permit will be issued shortly thereafter. I would also like to emphasize, with all of the heavy rain events that we've had a lot of stormwater problems and complaints and issues. Most of the systems that we have are not designed to take these kind of storms. In fact, none of them are designed to take these kind of storms. So basins overflow, inlets overflow, people get water where they never had it before. And that's true because this is more rain than we've had historically. So those are usually accurate statements. But we like to emphasize that we are responding to every complaint that we get. But due to the volume of complaints, it may take a day or two to get to it. We may not be able to handle the complaints in the day that they're received. So we'd solicit your patience in regard to those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoning officers, announcements?
Thank you, Madam
Mr. Reddick?
Chairperson. With regards to the zoning hearing board, we had last Thursday, the zoning hearing board did hear 3 cases at the Township Building, 1112 Fern Hill Road, 956 South Matlack, and 704 East Market Street. The zoning hearing board had decided to take their 45-day option to be able to render their decision. However, we did set a hearing for a date of August 22nd. They will render their decisions for those 3 matters on August 22nd. And we will also hear zoning hearing board application 16 of 2019. We've officially set a record since I've been here now. I had emailed this application to everyone last week with regards to 898 Sheridan Drive. It's a landlocked parcel that is 3.6 acres. It's located within the R3 zoning district. Now, the property does have a recorded access easement. However, our zoning ordinance requires 50 feet of street frontage. Since the property is landlocked, they can't meet that street frontage requirement. So therefore, the applicant is going to the zoning hearing board to seek a variance from section 8413A parens 5 with regards to the street frontage. That hearing will take place on the 22nd. I would ask whether the board would like to take a position on that application or not.
That property, I believe, is the Baker property, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that originally was given to Natural Lands Trust, is that correct?
That property was given to the Lands Trust and sold by the Lands Trust.
Yeah. It was the original owner's wish that that property not be developed. So,
Unfortunately, there wasn't a deed restriction placed on it. So the developer purchased it, and initially he came in and wanted to build several houses on the property, and we said no, because he could not conform to our current street requirements for street widths and such. So he opted to go with one single house. So it's going to be a nice setup. And he's going to do limited disturbance, so a majority of the trees are going to stay. He's going to do minimal impact, just enough to build the house.
So it's going to replace the current house?
This is a vacant piece of property. The Baker house was sold. Someone else already.
yeah, that's
owned
a
it.
second lot. There was 2 lots there, one each of about 4 acres. Approximately.
I would leave it up to the zoning board. I wouldn't oppose it.
Okay.
I agree.
I have no position.
Thank you very much. I have nothing further.
Good.
Okay, item number 11 is the final land development plan for 956 South Matlack Street, Luxor Apartments, along Highway property. Mr. Craig?
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank
Very good, thank you.
If the board recalls, this is an application that has been pending for a while in the township. It started with conditional use approval back in August of last year. It essentially is a just over 62,000 square foot exterior building footprint, 4-story lifestyle apartment or building, I should say, 205 residential units. As I say, it proceeded through conditional use approval, which was obtained in August of last year, and then worked its way through land development several months, where it was before your planning commission for recommendation, and now it's ultimately before you this evening for final land development plan approval. I was remiss, Mr. Tallman, for the applicant is with
me this evening, as well as our civil engineer, Mr. Salsaline. So if the board has any specific questions, we'd be more than happy to try and answer them. But again, this has been through a pretty rigorous review process for land development by your township and its professionals, which always do a very thorough job. And I hope Mr. Craig would agree with me that there are no pending issues. I will, with one exception, we did, as Mr. Webb stated earlier, we did proceed before the zoning hearing board at their last meeting with a request for variance to reduce 47 parking spaces in an underground parking garage as part of this development from 9 feet in width to 8 feet in width, and that application is pending before the zoning hearing board, and that decision will be issued August 22nd. It really doesn't impact the land development because that underground parking garage is not even a sheet in this proposed approval. If in fact that variance is approved, we will process that through the building permit application, and if it is not, then obviously it would not impact. But that essentially is the only remaining issue. Did I miss anything, Mr. Craig?
I don't believe so.
So I don't know if this is a good question for you, Mr. Gerald, but in the County of Chester, have these planning commission recommendations been thought through and acted upon?
All of the Chester County Planning Commission recommendations have been acted upon positively, with the exception of the provision for affordable housing.
Thank you.
Mr. Craig, on that, there was a recommendation about reducing the overall number of spaces, like in that particular Chester County document, or consideration of doing that. Was that acted upon, or?
It was suggested to the applicant that they could reduce the amount of spaces. The applicant feels that they need the amount of spaces provided, and since it exceeds our code requirements, it is allowable to do that, and they have provided sufficient stormwater management controls for the impervious surface. So it was addressed, but they did not reduce the spaces.
I just have a quick question regarding the width of the parking spaces. The original assessment that you made about parking spaces before, the amount of cars that you contemplated for this project, did that increase? Is that why you need more space, or what's the reasoning behind that?
No, sir. The request for relief is essentially reducing 47 parking spaces in the underground parking garage, which the applicant will control. In other words, those 47 spaces will be tenant assigned by the applicant. And it has been the applicant's experience that in this type of apartment complex that it seeks to construct, several of the residents don't drive large vehicles. They are younger folk who prefer the smaller vehicles, the Mini Coopers and that type of thing. So in this underground parking garage, my client has found it helpful to provide 1 foot narrower spaces to provide and assign to those tenants with smaller vehicles. So one of the concerns expressed by the zoning hearing board, well, is this open to the public at large or the tenant public at large, where people will be trying to jockey for positions and getting larger vehicles into these narrower spaces by 1 foot, mind you. And the answer to that was no. And as I stated, the tenant or the owner of the complex, my client, actually assigns these smaller spaces to particular tenants who have smaller vehicles. And the question was asked by Mr. Webb earlier this evening, what happens if somebody gets a larger vehicle? Well, then they are assigned a different space, and somebody with a smaller vehicle would be assigned these smaller spaces. But again, I'd like to remind you that we are totally compliant with the number of parking spaces that we need pursuant to the zoning ordinance. 214 spaces are required, and we are providing those full-size spaces. These are in addition to what is required by the zoning ordinance. So therefore, I hate to use the word surplus, but they're additional spaces, and they are premier spaces because they're in the underground parking garage. And I assume you would imagine that if you were a tenant in this building, you might prefer an underground parking space. If that answers your question, Mr. Pino.
Did that create more spaces in the underground?
It doesn't because of the way
So it's the
it's,
same amount of spaces as before, it's just,
the way the building is constructed, Mr. Tallman might be able to answer this better than I. Because there are pillars and supports in the underground garage, it's somewhat prudent to provide a narrower space to try and get these in. And we reminded the zoning hearing board that Westchester Borough, in fact, in I think the town center district, permits these narrower spaces as well.
thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so going to make a motion to accept the final plan development plan,
Actually, it would be to approve.
to approve it? Okay. Thank you for correcting it.
Absolutely.
All right, do I have a motion
I'll make a
to
motion.
approve final
Approve.
development plan for 956 South Matlack Street? Do I have a first and one for a second?
I will second.
Okay, public comment, please. Yes, please come forward.
Hi, I'm Meg Diskin. I live at 807 Spruce Avenue. I have a pretty good teacher voice, but I'll stand by the microphone anyway. I'm coming late to this process, so I'm just wondering if somebody on the board or the developer could speak as to the traffic impact of this plan on, specifically on the intersection of Matlack Street and 202. Thanks.
Certainly. Through the conditional use process, we were required to present a traffic impact study for the proposed development. And in fact, our traffic engineer gave testimony that the traffic to be generated by the proposed use will not have a negative impact on the surrounding property. In addition, my client went to extra lengths to provide for certain road improvements at the intersection of 202 and Matlack Street, extending back to this proposed development, which our traffic engineer testified would help improve conditions. I think everybody in this area knows that it can be a challenging intersection at times. So we definitely had to factor that in to have this approved at the conditional use approval level. And we felt, and we believe the township agreed by approving the conditional use, that with the traffic improvements proposed, there will be no negative impact from a traffic perspective. I hope that answers the question.
Any other public comment? Yes, Ms. Swart, come on up.
Hey, good evening. I respectfully ask that the supervisors not take action on this item simply because it is not consistent with township code, specifically under subdivision of land, chapter 72, review of final plan. The township engineer shall forward his written comments on the plan to the planning commission within a reasonable time. B says that the planning commission shall submit a written report to the supervisors together with the engineer's review. And then upon the planning commission's recommendation of approval of the plan, the applicant shall submit to the township an estimate of the cost of completion of required improvements for the purpose of determining the amount of financial security required to guarantees of their installation. Under C, under Board of Supervisors, in acting on the final plan, the supervisors shall review the plan and the written comments of the township engineer and the planning commission. And there's a few other ones on here, but my point is, because I'm limited in time, you're getting really picky on rules and compliance on citizens. This is code, this isn't a policy, this isn't a resolution that you passed. These are in effect, they're never adhered to. You all are asked to take responsibility for approving plans like this that have a major effect on the community and those passing through it. Just like Jarakian, I'm asking you, just hold off and please table this approval until proper review and proper public review can be conducted. I feel it's just very sad that I know, like, we don't even see the exterior of this building. I mean, this is what is being presented to those in the audience for a development of this magnitude. I just would ask you to table it until you get things in writing. So when people ask you, why did you approve projects like this, you have something in writing from the township engineer that it does meet these requirements. You have something from the Planning Commission that they addressed what the Chester County Planning Commission had to say. So thank you very much.
Just to be clear, that this is at the tail end of a process that I think started in 2018, at least I know when I was on the board, that was in discussion perhaps even before then. And during prior presentations, there were examples of a similar complex in a different part of Pennsylvania. We also, as board members, pardon? In Norristown, and we were invited, and I think most of us, maybe almost all of us, went to that facility specifically to see how it was structured, its amenities, the fact that they had this the stormwater runoff goes through this beautiful, I don't know, what would you call it, just open space in the center of this building. It's really quite lovely. And then consistently throughout that, we've had Mr. Jarrows and the developer come and speak to us at various board meetings. So I can't speak to your engineer's notes.
I'd be glad to speak to that if you'd like. 2 review letters were issued for this project. An initial review letter to the consulting engineer. Those comments were addressed, and a final letter was then issued, and both of those letters were provided to the Planning Commission as required. And the Planning Commission did discuss the project and did provide comments in the form of their minutes, which are written as well. So I believe we have fully met the requirements of the code regarding the removal.
Okay. So is there a motion to table this? Hearing none, is there a motion? We had a motion. Yeah, motion on the floor and a second. Any other public comment?
I just have one follow-up question. I think it's important for folks to know that this was a long project, as Madam Chair mentioned, and we thought out of the box on this because of what could have been there instead of what we're thinking, what we're having here. There could have been a whole bunch of different hotel, for example, which we didn't think would be as attractive. So there was a long process, even before some of us were board members on here. But I'd also like Mr. Jarrows to mention a little bit more about the traffic, because there is, above and beyond what they were required to do, traffic improvements. Perhaps you could speak a little bit to that for the audience's edification as to what they may be. The traffic report that was mandated, the impact study, stated that they really didn't have to do anything, but they did do some improvements. So I think that should be noted.
Absolutely. And again, I won't beat a dead horse, but there are several written documents in the record with regard to the review process conducted by Mr. Craig, the Chester County Conservation District. I won't go into length, but those of you who were in attendance at the conditional use hearing last year fully understood that the applicant was offering additional road improvements with respect to road widening, as in addition to signal timing, and that was fully taken into consideration, combined with current traffic and the traffic to be generated by this proposed use, to try and improve the levels of service at the intersection of Matlack Street and Route 202, which again, I think every resident in the room tonight knows it can be challenging at times. So the applicant went to extremes to try and approach additional property owners, as well as giving property owned to itself or of itself to do road widening, lane lengthening, and signal timing improvements to improve those levels of service. So it was not an easy or light task, but the applicant chose to undertake it, knowing that it would take those types of improvements to hopefully convince the board that this was a project that was going to address the impacts it would pose, And in fact, we believe that did happen because the board ultimately did approve that conditional use in August of last year.
Okay, have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item number 12, final land development plan for a 5,060 square foot COMAG building and accessory structures for the West Goshen Township Sewer Authority located at 848 South Concord Road. Mr. Craig.
Yeah, this is a pretty simple project. This is an improvement to the sewer treatment plant to facilitate meeting our phosphorus removal requirements. And the process that's used is called COMAG, and it requires some different facilities from what is there now. So right now there are 4, these are clarifiers, there are 4 of these now. There's another one here that's going to be removed, and a small building is going to be placed here with a small asphalt parking lot, and 2 smaller units placed here. So there is a slight change in impervious surface, and stormwater management facilities are being provided for that in the form of an infiltration bed up to the right-hand side a little bit. But it's mostly replacement of existing impervious surface on existing property, which is already part of the sewer treatment plant. So the Planning Commission has reviewed it and has recommended your approval. If you have any specific questions, I'm sure Mr. Walsh or Ms. Smith might answer them for you.
I'd just like to give a little more flavor to this building as well. I mean, this is a critical piece of what the treatment plant improvements are all about. This process that's housed in this building with those 2 additional vessels will reduce by over 97% the amount of phosphorus that leaves our sanitary sewer into Goose Creek. So for every 100 pounds that have been going into the creek in past years, that will be reduced by 97 down to 3. So it's a tremendous improvement in the amount of phosphorus. This technology was what enabled us to reach a settlement agreement with the EPA and the Delaware Riverkeeper Network that we've been in litigation or in discussion for many, many years. This technology is the basis for that settlement agreement. The actual operations of this process include several manual steps involving adjusting pH, addition of polymers, etc., to aid in settling, and there's a magnetite addition as well, which is a solid. So as an operator, need to be performing tasks. It's best performed in the building. That will also allow us to keep sensitive electrical control equipment in the right environment. So it makes sense to have a building to perform this operation.
Okay. So do we have our motions? I'm sorry, I got distracted by the fox hunt. No, fox hunt.
Move.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any public comment? Hearing none. What is this, my lucky night? No one's having comment? Yeah, right. All right, all in favor? Aye. We might get out of here by 8 tonight.
Sir, were you just joking? No, I want to know if the phosphorus can be reclaimed.
Afraid not. It's bound up in polymer chemicals, etc. And it ends up being part of the activated solution waste that ultimately pressed off.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
All right, we're going to move on to item 13, continued discussion of Alkalade properties. Request to amend the zoning district for 325 South 5 Points Road. Mr. Jarrett, you're back.
I am back, and with me this evening is Mr. Pusey and Mr. Winters, representing the applicant. The board may recall this is the 3.8 acre property in the township at 325 North 5 Points, about a driver's distance that way. The property is currently zoned R3, which requires 18,000 square foot lots. Currently there's a house used as 6 rental apartments, a detached garage that the owner, I believe, uses as a residence and a daycare building on the property. It's also my understanding there are several llamas and a large amount of junk on the property. My client was proceeding after making initial requests about rezoning the property and a reception that didn't seem to be in favor of that, started to proceed with a by right 5-lot subdivision of the property, and then we were invited back by the township to maybe explore a rezoning of the property to permit what my client was proposing, and that would be 11 homes on a cul-de-sac street with lots between 10 and 12,000 square feet. We received a consensus of the board to move forward, and thereafter we submitted a draft, we called it the R3C, Single Family Detached Dwelling Infill Overlay District, and that was submitted to the township, and I believe the township solicitor may have had some comments on that. We're here this evening looking for an opportunity for the board to maybe make some changes to that text that was submitted and try and move this forward. Obviously, timing becomes an issue for my client with regard to purchasing the property from the legal owner, as my client is the equitable owner having it under agreement. So timing again is an issue, but we're here this evening to try and answer any questions the supervisors may have with what was submitted, and perhaps with any comments with regard to the text.
I do know that Ms. Camp had an opportunity to review the draft ordinance amendment as provided by Mr. Jaros. She's made some notations, but really, I guess it's just, I think the next step in this process involves an identification of what parcels the supervisors may want to include with any potential zoning change. Not singling out this singular parcel, but perhaps paying greater consideration to the surrounding neighborhood and the effects that a zoning change might cause. So I think part of the discussion this evening should entail the parcels at play here.
Mr. Jennings, one in particular, since I haven't seen the solicitor's comments, what in particular is the concern?
There really isn't much by way of concern. I think what Mr. Jaros provided is essentially a one-page breakdown of proposed area and bulk regulations for the board's consideration, generally in line with that which has been proposed for the singular lot, essentially reducing some of the setbacks and the minimal lot areas, those sorts of things. I wouldn't say that Kristen has particular concern with any of the area and bulk regulations as set forth. It's definitely something that we and the board can work with. I think one concern that was identified by Ms. Camp deals with the types of single-family homes at issue. In one portion of the proposed text, it speaks of single-family detached dwellings, and in another, it speaks of single-family attached dwellings. So perhaps Mr. Jaros can provide some clarity there.
That would be a typo.
Okay.
Attached should be detached.
Very good.
Under 84-14.3.
Aside from that, I mean, it's been titled an overlay, and we suspect it's been titled that way because one of the RC, whether it be the A or the B, also used that overlay language, but I don't think it's necessary, nor does Kristen, for this to necessarily be an overlay district. Basically, a whole new zoning district could be created.
Would it be possible for you to forward to us or comment, since we haven't?
Sure.
I can only speak for myself. I haven't seen it. I didn't recall.
Sure.
The email.
Yes, they're just, and I can pass this down now, but it's really just quick handwritten notes on what Mr. Jaros provided. But I'm happy to share that. Again, they pertain specifically to the area and bulk regulations, which would need to be sorted out and reviewed by the township's engineer. And they would all hinge on, those specific numbers would all hinge on what properties are or would be affected here, aside from just this 3.8 acre parcel. We certainly wouldn't recommend singularly amending zoning for that one parcel.
Would it be advisable to have an opportunity for our engineer to look at that and come back and revisit it so we can have a better understanding of what these comments might be?
Absolutely.
I can address that. I've actually already have looked at the surrounding parcels, and I provided a rough sketch to Ms. Camp showing additional parcels that could be added. I don't recall the exact number at this point, but I think it was over 100.
I think the number that I heard was approximately 150 parcels.
Right.
And I think it is identified, and I believe you provided this, Mr.
I did, yeah.
Right. And I can pass these down as well.
The situation is that the surrounding area is very consistent with the area and bulk requirements that are provided in this proposed text amendment, to the point that they already conform to these area and bulk requirements. So they could be added to the district and be in full conformance with the area and bulk requirements. So that could actually have some benefit to the property owners of those properties, because they are all non-conforming lots presently in the R3 district. And as such, if the property owner wishes to make improvements to those properties, they usually have to go through a variance procedure with the zoning hearing board, which of course takes time and money and engineering and what have you. So by increasing the size of the district around this particular parcel, many of these parcels would actually come into compliance with zoning and would not have to go through a variance procedure. So there could be some very tangible benefits to a pretty good number of property owners as a result of using this as either an overlay or a separate zoning district. Either one would have the same benefit.
So this is just a discussion item for the board this evening. If the board were so inclined, we could further work with the township's engineer and Mr. Jaros and develop what Mr. Jaros has already provided as, a rough draft of the area in bulk, and turn it into a actual proposed zoning text amendment and map amendment, and put something together more formally for the board's consideration.
I personally think that's what we're pursuing.
If I may, I'd like to suggest the board authorize us to work with staff to finalize it and then authorize it for advertisement, and then consider perhaps a date for a text amendment hearing, which after advertisement and getting to the county planning commission for review and comment, you would be taking action on it after you hear the comments from the county planning commission, perhaps from our engineer as well that evening. But it's just a process so you don't have to wait another month to come back and have you authorize it then. I implore you to consider that this evening, to take that action.
And I have no problem with that occurring, simply because, as Mr. Jaros has indicated, it is a pretty extensive review process that takes time, county planning, advertisement, especially given the text and the map amendments. So if the board were so inclined, it could authorize us to move forward and collaborate to put together a formal amendment.
Sounds good, but I still haven't seen that information. Before I vote for something, I'd like to have at least something in front of me. So I really request that in the future we have some of that information beforehand. So when Mr. Jaros comes up to start speaking, obviously he did his work, but just so we can have it and have some time to look at it, and I can better understand what's going on. That's part of it too, that Jaros.
These are Kristen's comments.
I'd make the motion that we authorize procedure to proceed.
Talk into the microphone, please.
I made a motion to proceed.
I'll second that. So what are we proceeding
To authorize staff
for the advertising?
to work with Mr. Giles.
I have no problem authorizing the staff to work with Mr. Jaros for a solution. I do want to ask a question somewhat related to this. I've been told by my staff, who has been working with you, that there's actually a better traffic benefit for having the 11 homes with the cul-de-sac rather than the original by right 5-lot plan. So I'd like to hear more about that.
Good point.
Because that was one of my main concerns. That's a terrible area.
Sure.
Going around that bend.
I think that was one of the points recognized by one, if not more, supervisors and or staff as the by right plan
Right.
started to go forward, because it called for, Mr. Pusey and Mr. Winters, correct me, it called for more 5 driveway outlets out into the street as opposed to keeping it internalized in a cul-de-sac formation on the 11. So unless I'm missing something, I think that was recognized, and this proposal calls for a better design development than the by right. And I don't know if Mr. Craig has anything to add on that.
No, I would agree. It's much more efficient to have traffic entering and exiting from a cul-de-sac, single point of access, then I think everyone will admit the sight distance on 5 Points Road is terrible to begin with, and we'd be adding more driveways to that, so that is definitely a benefit.
So for clarification, it would have been 5 driveways coming out on 5 Points Road.
Correct. Okay, correct.
Yeah, that would have been better.
Yeah, this way there's none.
All right, any other questions from any other board members? All right, we have a first and a second. Public comment? Dr. White, excuse me. Come on up.
Hey, Dr. White, West Goshen. Rick, what are the lot sizes in Suburban Village about right next to?
10 to 11,000 square feet.
So they're all 10, 11,000 square feet? Okay.
I mean, there's a very few exceptions. I think one's as great as 12 or 13,000, but they're almost all 10 to 11,000 square feet.
So why is the Discovery Day School parcel a higher minimum lot size?
Because it's zoned R3, which has a minimum of 18,000
okay.
square feet.
So the adjoining properties are of a different zoning?
They're all zoned R3 too, but they already existed when the current R3 zoning went into effect. So by putting the R3 zoning into effect, they were then made non-conforming.
I see. Would it be possible to have a by right plan that would be a cul-de-sac type of plan to maintain them?
At 18,000 square feet? No. We did look at that.
Yeah, we tried.
Pretty hard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay. First and a second, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Jennings, would you be able to address the next item?
I
Item
would.
14.
Yes, Madam Chair.
We just finished introducing it. Conditional use decision and order. The Westchester Area School District, Greystone Elementary School at 1125 Pottstown.
Thank you. Agenda item 14 entails a conditional use application, hearing process, and potentially a decision rendering this evening for the Westchester Area School District. The application was dated May 6, 2019, and the request was for conditional use approval to develop a new elementary school to be known as the Greystone Elementary School, located at 1125 Pottstown Pike. The board conducted a public hearing on the application last month on June 18, 2019, in accordance with the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. Thereafter, from the testimony and exhibits presented at the hearing, the solicitor's office prepared a draft decision for the board's consideration. Ms. Camp shared the draft decision with the board and the applicant's counsel, Mr. Ross Unruh. The draft decision contains findings of fact, discussion, and a proposed order with conditions to be imposed. As it stands for the board's consideration this evening is a draft decision which reads, "And now, this 22nd day of July 2019, upon consideration of the application filed by applicant, the board votes to approve a conditional use pursuant to section 84-12G1 of the ordinance to allow applicant to develop the property with an elementary school subject to the conditions of approval stated below. The board also approves pursuant to the authority in section 84-5710F2A the location of the parking lots in the front and side of the proposed new school as depicted on the plan, as was presented last month. There are various conditions of approval, which are thereafter set forth. I'm happy to address those conditions now if the board pleases. Otherwise, we can ask any questions we might have or entertain a motion.
Just point of clarification, Mr. Jennings, number 11, applicant shall revise the plans to provide pedestrian access from Aaron Avenue to the new school along the west side of the existing access driveway. The location and specifications for such pedestrian access shall be determined and approved by the board as part of the land development plan approval. So last time we were discussing this, it was a point of contention that the school district had the position that they did not want to put in the sidewalk. A lot of us felt that that would be an important addition. If I read this correctly, that this will be a part of the conditional use.
This would be a condition of approval of the application, and I believe that that is a condition that is acceptable to the applicant, and perhaps Mr. Emery could speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings.
Ross Under here on behalf of the school district. I'm here with Mark Rose, who's also with the school district. I have reviewed the draft decision that your solicitor sent to us this afternoon, and all the conditions set forth therein are acceptable to the school district.
Thank you very much.
Ross, I believe Kristen was in contact with your office regarding a late request that I had to add in a condition of use.
Yes, it's in there.
Okay, it's probably not visible to the other board members yet.
Okay.
And the response that I got was not quite exactly what I wanted, so I had actual clarification that the condition really is that the roof design conduit runs from the roof and a space be allowed to, in other words, make the building solar ready for a PV system to be installed at a future date. And that it's good to design it in from the start because it's so much harder to do it once the building is done. So we're not asking a condition of use to buy any equipment, we're just asking for the design to lay out and make sure that the roof is structurally good enough to hold the panels, where they would be mounted, where the runs would go, and where the inverter and other equipment will be placed within the building at some point in the future. Is that acceptable?
Yes, my understanding that Mr. Groves did try to contact the structural engineer, but he'll get a hold of him tomorrow to make sure that that's addressed. Mark, you want to?
So what we can do is we can make sure that the roof structure, we'll probably have to beef up the roof structure to put these solar panels on top. But running the conduits and running all the extra stuff at this point would not be anything except add money to the project. So what we can do is assume that we know the weights, we can probably beef up the roof structure, but if you're going to add these, the better time to do those is add them in a place that when you have someone come out to actually view the top of the roof, which direction these solar panels would need to go, and then put the structure up on top, whether it's the conduits that go through the roof, tie together somewhere up underneath the roof structure, and then go down to a mechanical room or another place where you'd have those. That's all done at the time when a roof solar panel structure system would work out in there. The biggest issue at this point in time that we'd have, being 95% design, is making sure that the weight of those would hold up. So the structural engineer needs to look at the weight of what this system might be in order to have the support for those. And if we have to have roof joists that have to be beefed up a little, that's what we have to look at this point. But at this point, it's 95% design. It's going to be real tough to do anything other than maybe change some roof trusses at this point to continue to get it out to bid, which we're looking at doing on August 5th.
What about space for the equipment that's needed ultimately to be
up on the roof? There really isn't anything on the roof except for vents going through the roof.
Down at the ground.
Mechanical room.
Mechanical room space for an inverter and other equipment needed
to connect in.
Yeah, that stuff, we have some room in the mechanical room right now. How large those things are, I have no idea. We don't have a person who does that at this point, looking at that information. So it's going to be really hard to tell at this last second to try to make sure that we have room for all of those things. If you can actually ask the state of Pennsylvania to make it a little more cost effective, we can certainly look into this on other stuff. We've done this before. We have a solar panel right now on Henderson. That solar panel on Henderson is nothing but a maintenance nightmare, to be quite honest with you.
Well, I hear your opinion, but I just always asking for some flexibility in the design now. So
Right,
when it
and
comes to plan,
like I said,
it's
what we
a
can
good
do-
idea. It's designed to be able to put it in easily without adding even more cost.
Well, like I said, what we can do is we can make sure that we have a roof structure there to hold it up. That's the biggest part of it at this point in time.
You would be amenable to putting that as condition of use.
And that is, what's written there is that we can look at and make sure it's kind of, it's what it says is, I'll go back and read it again. We'll design and prepare the roof so it's going to be ready to accommodate space for the panels. It's also going to hold up the weight. So right now the space, almost all of the entire roof is flat except for some sloping areas right at the front and a couple of areas. It's going to be flat. It's a flat, relatively flat surface with a little pitch off to the back. All of that area can be built for that later if it's in the right orientation for solar panels. And that would have to come from a solar panel company that tells you what orientation to put those panels to make sure that they're more, you make sure that they're most useful that you can get out of them if you're going to purchase them. The biggest thing, like you said, would be the weight, which we need the structural engineer to make sure that solar panels as they are today, because who knows in 10 or 15 years it can change. So that weight would be something that's really most critical this time to change in the design. Poking through the roof, putting wires through, finding a place with an inverter. I'm not sure how big those things are at this point. That inverter part could be something, but running the wires and putting all that through is really not. That would be an issue.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Anyone from the audience? Dr. White? Come on up against this.
West Goshen Township, one of the conditions we were thinking of at the planning commission was pedestrian protection at the front of the building with some sort of structures to protect the people there at the front. Can that be a condition?
The school district does not have a design for bollards. You were in the hearing, Mark, with the discussion about bollards, and the planning commission didn't, that wasn't one of the conditions. I know that was something you wanted to do, but the planning commission didn't make a recommendation in that regard. It's my understanding we had not pursued that.
There's either a 6 or 8 inch curve along that whole entire length of driveway up in front of the bus. Would pull up before you get to anything up on there.
Okay.
So there's a 6 or 8 inch curve that's going to be there anyway.
Would the board be willing to look into that as a condition, to have something in addition to the curb, such as bollards or planters or something? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Comment and a question. Comment number one is, as far as the solar panels, they're very minute. I've installed several of them. Very minute as far as the weight concerned. Consideration for wiring is nothing. System is going to be this big in the basement for that application. As far as your comment, it's a nightmare. Definitely, it's a nightmare, but that's the way of the future. Second question, Mr. Ronru, would you be kind enough, if you can address this question, you have a constructive environment as far as the total cost of this structure. Doesn't have to be exact. What's the total cost of the structure altogether? Thank you.
What's your estimate?
Right now, the estimate's around $22.5 million.
Okay, anyone else in the audience? motion? Okay.
I'll second the motion.
All right, so we have a motion on item 14. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Craig and Mr. Jennings, to speak on this issue. Number 15, discussion of zoning uniformity for parcel located at 307 West Town Road.
This is a parcel that was subdivided, I believe it was last year. I don't recall the square footage, but it was a relatively small piece of ground that was split off of the adjacent cemetery and added to an existing MPD parcel. The zoning district is different for the cemetery, and I suggested to the owners at the time of the subdivision that they change the zoning to make it consistent, and they chose not to do that at the time. I don't have it right now, I'm sorry. I should have had it ready to be projected. But it's a very small chunk of land on the backside of an existing parcel off of West Town Road. And the applicant now wants to have the zoning be consistent for the entire parcel, which we're in total agreement with and suggested during the subdivision process.
Just to piggyback off of that, an application for the rezoning was received approximately 1 month ago, and I am in agreement with Mr. Craig's summary and recommendation as far as addressing the split zoning. It is just a sliver in the rear of the property, zoned differently than the vast majority of the remainder. The two zoning districts we're talking about are MPD, and the rear portion is the C5 zoning district. The C5 area is presently vacant with limited macadam and a fence.
Okay, so are you making a recommendation that we approve zoning uniformity for this location?
Yes.
Yes.
Just for clarification, it would be old MPD?
Yes.
And for audience's clarification, what does MPD stand for?
Multi-purpose district. And there it is. So this was the pre-existing parcel. This piece was added. This lot line was erased. And this would change from C5 to MPD, which is what this is.
Thank you for reminding us with the visual.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Just for clarification purposes, none of this has been authorized, advertised. It's not something that the board can approve this evening. It still needs to go through the process to allow for the zoning amendment, both text and map, to make the uniformity a reality here.
Motion would then be to approve you going forward.
To authorize us to move forward with the appropriate drafting and the advertising for the same.
If he's doing that, I'll second.
Public comment? Yes, Ms. Gagne.
Can you point out where the cemetery actually is located? Is it the C5 right there?
Right there.
And that's Greenmount Cemetery?
I don't know what the name of the cemetery is.
Yes.
It's Greenmount Cemetery. And they're just looking to, okay, so, do they give a reason why? Or, like, do they want to expand their parking lot or something? Like, I don't know what that is. I'm just trying to see why.
Well, part of the problem is their parking already encroached on the property to begin with. So I think the general intent was just to clean it up so that all the parking was on the property it was supposed to be on. The other thing is the parking can be there in a C5. It's not non-conforming, so there was no requirement to change the zoning district at the time the subdivision was done.
There is no stated purpose in the application itself for the request, but it is desirable to generally have a parcel that's uniformly zoned and not split zoned. It just makes it more desirable and valuable and usable without zoning relief.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second? Okay. Oh, yeah. no other public comment? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and item number 16, Republic Services Waste and Recycling Contract Extension. Mr. Lalonde.
Yes, we currently are in a 3-year contract with Republic Services for waste recycling collection throughout the township. The way the original bid was written and the contract, at the time the state law was you could do a 3-year contract with 2 1-year extensions. That law has subsequently changed. The next time we do go out to bid, we can do a 5-year and then a 5-year extension. That's the state legislature's action there. However, we're still in this, the original contract, so 3-year, 2019 is our 3rd year. We're heading into budget season, so we wanted to get this in front of you early. If you don't approve the extension, we will have to go out to bid immediately for 2020, 21, and 22. We're receiving excellent service from Republic. I hope the other members who, or the other residents here, like their service with Republic, as opposed to Mascaro, our previous hauler. They submitted a letter to the board, as they have in the past, desiring to execute the first of the 2 extensions at an increase of 3% for the contract, resulting in a price increase of $68,627 for 2020, with a total budgeted contract expense of $2,356,218. So I'm looking for guidance from the board. And then Mr. Walsh had some comments.
Yeah, Casey, can you just remind me what the annual increases were during the 3-year contract that we've had? Was it 3% a year?
It's 3% a year across the 3 years so far.
Okay, so my comment would be is we look at this 1-year extension, or is it just the 1 year?
Yeah, we can only do 1 at a time for in the current setup.
So current inflation for this type of service, so logistics, vehicle maintenance, transportation is running about 2%. Labor inflation is about 3%. And I don't know if the landfill fees have increased or not.
We pay those, so that's not part
of it. So they're separate. So from a service perspective, I would suggest that, you know, a counter proposal of maybe 2.5% is a more reasonable increase. I know it's relatively small, but I don't see that the cost of the service is running more than 3% in terms of inflation for this business. So a suggestion to the board would be to ask Mr. Lalonde to request an extension at 2.5%.
My comment to add to that is that the cost of recycling has dramatically increased since China is no longer accepting a lot of our stuff, so that it's worthwhile doing the 2.5% as you suggest as a thing, but I would not object to 3% just because of the increase in the cost of recycling.
I would support Sean's motion for 2.5%. He so chooses to do that. I wouldn't give a flag as to what we're willing to do in the bottom line, though. I'm kind of with you on the 2%, not necessarily on the 3%.
So do you have any information on how the rate was set initially? Because it shows that the contract is a waste and recycling contract, so 2.5%, and can they provide us with more information to help us understand why we should pay them 3%?
We can ask.
Okay.
That's
I
why I'm
think
bringing
it's
this
helpful
early.
for us to see that with that breakout,
Sure.
especially if they are experiencing increased costs. That would maybe be justification for why there's
Yeah,
a 3%.
the letter is what they provided to me so far, so
Okay.
just wanted to get in front of you.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Why don't we table this then, for Casey to help everything come back?
Okay, great, thank you.
Can I make a comment or two? I know you're not voting on it, but I have some information I think you might find helpful.
Okay, come on,
Thank you.
podium.
It's part information we just asked about. letter that was posted online from Republic Services says a 3% increase over the current year, 3 per unit rates. So are those 3 per unit rates off of that, what I just gave you? Waste collection, automated recycling, and bus stop collection? I have it highlighted on the first page.
I'd have to look at this if I can't answer you right now.
Okay. Well, my question is, it doesn't, reading back the minutes when it was approved back on June 29, 2016, the numbers aren't adding up, because I looked at the Citizen Transparency website, and the first year of the contract was the 1.4 million for the recycling and the 15 for the bus stop. But I don't see on Citizens Transparency where we're paying for the waste collection, the 3.2 million.
I can't answer that. Ms. Ward, you've been asked to ask these questions to Ms. Denham. She's not here tonight. So if I could have you get in touch with her tomorrow morning.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. If the board looks over the minutes or the 2 pages I gave you, it's just showing that in 2017, the first year of the contract, we only paid Republic Services 1.38 million. So I made some notes, I think, that are copied on here as well. It seems like somehow we paid them actually $125,000 less, which is a great thing. But I'm just curious as to why there's a discrepancy with some of this information. And also, the bid 3 years ago did not include a bid for 1 time per week. And I noticed on that West Goshen community website that the information was posted about the recycling contract on the agenda tonight. And there were hundreds of people that commented, so the board might want to take a look at the community, Westchester or West Goshen community, and see what people had to say. A lot of people seem to be willing to go to 1 service per week.
We'd still have to collect the same amount of trash. We'd have probably 15. Ms. Ward, I'm just trying to answer your question. We'd probably have to have 15 trash trucks in here once a week, which is more, Mr. Woodward's here, which is more detrimental to our roads. And you'd be forcing people with 5 or 6 people in their house with 1 trash order a week. I'm sure you get just as many people complaining about that. Mr. Woodward, would you agree?
Yeah. We have quite a few homes that have full toters.
Twice a week. Right.
Okay,
So I would suggest it would be a balanced discussion there. Some people make less, some people make more. So.
Well, I try to protect you for if in the budget discussions we're going to talk about stormwater fees or whatnot, that you could actually go to the citizens and say, we looked at everything. We had a trash contract up, and we looked at how we might be able to reduce that.
We look at 1 a week.
Mr. Lalonde, may I please have the floor, and would you kindly respect me?
You're way expired. I'm just trying to answer your question.
The meeting on.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fraud, waste, and abuse, we need to make sure it's not happening. Thank you.
Casey?
Yes, sir.
Just a question. Ms. Schwartz's document actually reminds me of something I shouldn't assume. We had 21, we were proposing 21 garbage commercial bins for the septic stops.
Yes.
How many have we actually been able to get? Because I know 21 was a number we were shooting for.
Yeah, we put 21 in there as a long shot.
Right, because of the grading and the
Correct.
Do you know?
We currently have 4 installations. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it did solve a lot of problems.
It did. I saw the.
We're still looking at probably 6 or 8 more.
Okay. So it's still on our.
It is. I mean, it's just we're only charged for the ones we do. The bid number was for the 21.
So would Republic honor any additions that we're
Absolutely.
putting the 4, just for a point of
Yeah,
clarification?
it would just be an add to the contract. Any more that we add to that.
So I've heard back from some business leaders and some community residents on Paoli Pike and where we put those to. They're very grateful.
It's helped a lot.
It's a big difference. And we used to see those soda cans and everything from people waiting at the bus stop all over the place on Paoli Pike. It made a big difference. So I'm looking forward to those additional ones coming in.
Yes, but we are not charged for all 21, obviously. It's just for what service we have.
Okay,
That's all.
good, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, moving on to item 17, ordinance number 7-2019 regarding fireworks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'd open the record for a public hearing on the proposed ordinance amendment. By way of introduction, this evening we will conduct a public hearing as part of the regularly advertised meeting to consider the adoption of an amendment to provisions of Chapter 42 of the West Goshen Township Code, which regulates fireworks. The title and summary of the proposed ordinance amendment is as follows. An ordinance of the Township of West Goshen, Chester County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 42 of the Code of West Goshen Township titled Fireworks to comply with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania fireworks law. By way of ordinance amendment and introduction, the proposed ordinance amendment serves to bring the Township's code into compliance with the state law, which would ensure the proper regulation of the use of fireworks within West Goshen Township. The ordinance amendment defines and distinguishes between two types of fireworks, the first being consumer fireworks and the other being larger display type fireworks. The proposed ordinance amendment requires that the use, sale, and storage of the smaller consumer fireworks can be operated without a permit by an adult, which is permitted by the more recent 2017 Pennsylvania fireworks law. The ordinance additionally regulates display fireworks, which would still require permitting as issued by West Goshen Township. So again, I think that the easiest way to summarize and describe this ordinance amendment is just simply bringing the Township's code into compliance with Pennsylvania law. By way of hearing exhibits, I'd like to introduce and move for the admission of just 3 exhibits related to this ordinance, namely Exhibit B, or Board 1, proof of publication in the Daily Local News, which occurred on July 10th, 2019. Exhibit B2, correspondence dated July 9th, 2019, from Kristen Camp to the Chester County Law Library, providing the proposed amendment for public inspection. And lastly, Exhibit B3, correspondence of that same date, July 9th, 2019, from Kristen Camp to the Daily Local News, which likewise provides proposed amendment for public inspection. At this time, unless there are questions of the board, we could entertain a motion for the adoption of the proposed ordinance amendment.
Just a point of clarification, this is more of a paperwork issue. I've got item 17, fireworks, but I have an ordinance in front of me for cyber schools. That's just a mistake.
I delivered Friday the corrected ordinance.
Okay.
That was part of the package.
Just want to make sure I'm not voting on
cyber
that.
schools. Because originally it was advertised as a single ordinance, we got rid of cyber schools.
Okay, so we're just updating the fireworks.
Just the fireworks, correct. Chapter 42 only.
Correct.
Are there any other questions from the board?
No.
We could then entertain a motion at this time, if you so choose.
I'll make a motion to update the ordinance. Chapter 42 fireworks.
Did you say update? Did you say so we're still updating? I thought this was the final version.
Amending the
Amending, okay, sorry. Just okay. Is there a second? Oh, okay, so there's a second. Okay.
Any public comment on this ordinance? Yes, please come forward.
Meg Diskin. I know this is just a paperwork matter, but just curious, does West Goshen have any regulations regarding the use of the fireworks? This is more about who's permitted to buy them, sell them, own them, and store them. Are there any regulations as far as where, when, or how individuals can use fireworks in the township?
Other than the nuisance.
So it follows the nuisance ordinance?
I'm not suggesting that it does, but that's one area that could be addressed.
I know some other municipalities in Chester County, after the change in the Pennsylvania state laws, did amend their own ordinances to regulate the use of fireworks. I think particularly Westchester Borough did that. So just something you might want to look into in the future, because I see a lot of complaints on Nextdoor and other social media, people complaining that this is upsetting to their pets or disrupting their lives. It's not my personal bugaboo, but I just wondered if it's something you thought about.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Okay. Any other comments by anyone on the board? Anyone in the audience? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Number 18, item 18, excuse me, municipal complex office cleaning bids. Mr. LeBlanc.
We've received kind of impromptu notice from our cleaning company, Chalice. The owner and operator had decided to retire from the business completely. We got a couple of weeks' notice, so we put together a bid for cleaning services for the entire municipal complex. Police building, our building, parks, sewer, which had been neglected for some time for cleaning services. We were paying about $6,800 a month for the service for all the buildings. They're in here at least 4 hours a day cleaning. And with the incredible amount all 4 buildings get, they do a very good job, but they are a closing shop. So we put out a bid. The low bid was CleanNet USA in King of Prussia, PA. The monthly bid amount came in surprisingly low. We were very pleased. $5,753 a month for the same exact service that we're getting now. Chalice is closing up shop in August, so we have to act on this if we could tonight, because we'll be without a service very soon. We appear to be, obviously time will tell. If we don't like the service with the company, we will rebid it. But so far, they've done everything right, said everything right, so we're recommending CleanNet USA at $57.53 per month.
Have we had an opportunity to get referrals from existing clients?
Yes, well, we've done the full investigation of the company, and they appear to be reputable and should provide us good service.
Okay.
And at a cost savings.
Casey, just 2 quick questions. You mentioned what we're paying now monthly?
About $6,800 for actually only 2 days a week down at sewer. This will be 5 days a week service at the sewer plant. Okay. So it's an increase in service for about $1,200 less a month. $1,100 less a month.
And is the contract going to be a yearly contract?
Yeah, it's a 3. We typically do. We kind of follow the original trash contract. We do a 3-year contract. We do have an out if service is not provided.
What's the out? Just so
60 days, I think.
Yeah, 60 or 90.
60 or 90 days out. If we're not seeing the service, if they don't correct to our satisfaction, give them written notice and we'll rebid.
So they have 30. They're going to be. They'll be evaluated for 90 days.
Well, it's notice. So once we determine their service is not up to snuff and they can't correct our problems, we have to give them 90 days notice.
Okay,
or
that's
60 or
what I
90.
was going to
Correct.
question I had. Okay.
Correct.
That can be any time during the 3 years.
Anytime during the 3 years.
So for the clarification of the audience, we have CleanNet USA bid at $5,753 monthly, and perhaps you can tell them what the other bids were.
Oh yes, of course. The high bid was Janny King, if anybody's familiar with that, in Norristown. Their bid was $8,629.19 per month. And then CNS Building Services in Bensalem at $6,995 a month. So it's a departure.
Make the motion, we accept the CleanNet.
I'll second that.
Public comment. Margie, come on up.
Hi, just wondering if it's possible perhaps to put another bid out and get some local contracts. I just feel services like this, it would be so nice to have a local West Goshen, Westchester area company do these contracts. I mean, all 3 of these companies were, 20 miles away or so. And I know that it was on short notice, but in the future, I just think it would be nice to give some of our local business to local companies? Thank you.
We advertise this per the law. We have to publicly advertise this. These are the bids we got. We can't direct, it's unlawful for us to direct work to our local residents. This is $60,000+ a year. It has to be bid, so we have to we live and die by the bid for state law. So
Can we just put like those bids on our website sometime? I see other municipalities put bids on their front page of their website.
this was posted.
On the website.
It was posted on the website, and these are the 3 bids we got.
Great, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, number 19.
Oh, I don't have to.
Sorry?
There's no vote.
Oh, we had the vote, sorry, that's right. We had public comment. Okay. All in favor?
Aye. Great, thank you.
Okay, item number 19, discussion and possible approval of intermunicipal agreement between West Goshen Township, West Goshen Sewer Authority, and Westtown Township. Who is here to speak on behalf of the Sewer Authority?
Mr. Walsh and Tina's here as well.
At the Sewer Authority Board, we negotiated about a year contract with Westtown Township for their fees that they pay, participate for the Sewer Authority. It basically, times change, so contracts need to be changed. So that's why we kind of renegotiated. That's one reason. The other reason is that we kind of had a discrepancy between what maintenance means and what capital means. And their cost was basically based off of which each of them met. So we worked for about a year, Sean and I, and also Ross's firm, to try to negotiate what that meant and clarify it more so that we have a separate definition for the maintenance. So it was very clear as to who paid what and what amount. And we felt it was fair on both parties, the language. So they did agree to it last month, finally, after back and forth of a year of negotiations. So Sean did a great job, too, in helping negotiate that contract. Any questions from the board or public?
I know this is an ongoing matter. You guys worked really hard on it. Thank you for that.
Well, I'll just give a little bit more flavor to Tina's point. So as you're aware, we had fairly quick agreement with the other townships around what the agreement update needed to look like, and they were all signed by June of 2018. However, Westtown, they challenged this definition of capital versus maintenance, and it was a protracted, drawn-out process with them for various reasons, but we stuck with our position, and we prevailed in the end, and there's no difference between this Westtown agreement in terms of how the determination of their share of the capital cost is made versus any of the other townships. If you're interested, the specific change that was added into this agreement is under the definitions on page 3 and page 5, where capital improvement and maintenance is specifically spelled out, so that this gave them some comfort that going forward there wouldn't be any ambiguity, although the ambiguity was all on their part, not ours. So we finally reached the finish line. Thank you, Tina, and we're ready to close out this chapter of updated agreements.
Thank you.
So are we adopting, approving? Approving, okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
I will make a motion to approve the Westtown, West Goshen sewage treatment agreement.
Okay. Any public comment on this issue? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item number 20, various ordinance amendments. Follow up on discussions we've had in prior meetings.
regard to various proposed amendments, I'm not sure which the board wishes to discuss first. I can tell you Ms. Camp continues to work on the proposed special events ordinance. I know there's been some recent discussion regarding the cyber charter school proposed amendment, as well as the historic resources. I unfortunately don't have the benefit of having the background and familiarity with some of these, but I'm happy to address any questions that the board has regarding any of those mentioned items.
Yeah, did you want to start with the historical resources?
Well, I don't see anything specific to cyber charter schools. I only see a letter.
Yeah, it's just for discussion, and there's no finally drafted ordinance yet for cyber schools.
I would make a motion to just table this to next, as far as the cyber schools, but it's the historic aspect of this, since we have some information as a historic commission.
Mr. Moore is here representing Mr. Freeze about that cyber school issue. They just wanted to have an opportunity to get before the board and just talk.
We were here last time. I represent Bill Freeze. He owns 211 Carter Drive and owns the properties down on the east side of Haggerty Boulevard, the driving range and the buildings that are around that. They are both in I-2 zones. And when we were here last time, we broached the topic of allowing an educational use in an industrial zone. We didn't fit under cyber, as your new definition. We have students that come to the site. We have 80 students a couple days a week. We have 100 students another couple days a week. They are all really cyber students the other 3 days a week. Mr. Webb provided a list. Mr. Webb was charged with the job of providing everybody a list of the educational uses currently in the industrial zones, and I think there are 5 that he provided. Missed one. 6? Westchester University. Okay, there's 6. We have the Pennsylvania Performing Arts folks down in Carter Drive, and they are looking to expand. And we want to either give them our entire building or build another building down at Industrial or down at Haggerty Boulevard to allow them. Mr. Pyle rightly raised the issue as to whether there was a safety issue, because industrial zones are places where you allow manufacturing. Each of your 4 zones down there, they talk about production and processing of goods, not slaughtering animals, no retail. It's not really heavy manufacturing. We can't find any heavy manufacturing in any of the industrial districts we're around. We did an informal search and couldn't find it. Ms. Camp had suggested that I put some language together, put a letter out to you all on midweek last week. Let's go there next. July 15th. That suggested, followed up Ms. Camp's suggestion as to proposing ways to monitor an educational use coming into an industrial zone. I put together a couple ideas in there, but the best idea I had was after I pushed send, and I sent Mr. Lalonde an email to him to read it all. And it would seem that if you're inclined to allow an educational use in an industrial zone, one way to monitor that is to have some kind of a buffer, some kind of distance buffer inside an industrial zone that says you can't have an educational use within X number of feet, 200 feet of a production processing or whatever it is. You all would have to come up with a concept as to what is safe, what distance would be safe. But we would suggest to you that given the uses that are in our industrial zones, industrial districts where we are, there is nothing really that is dangerous to children. That is not to say that there won't be applications for production processing, manufacturing, that is, but with quantifiable numbers inside the zoning ordinance, Mr. Webb could easily say, well, that's too close to this use, or that's far enough away from this use that would be fine. It would preclude having to come to the zoning hearing board, go through that drill. I understand that it takes a little time to get a zoning amendment, but that's kind of where we are, and that's kind of where Kristen led me in her most recent letter to me.
I'm not opposed to exploring those possibilities. I want to say that. In fact, that area currently is being looked upon in the same manner. I just want to hold off on making any decisions right at this point, which I know is just a discussion. But I want to assure you, at least from my end, my main concerns, of course, were having younger children and industrial zones. Even if the informal survey that you might have taken doesn't have dangerous manufacturing, it could always have it.
I don't suggest you should rely on that.
But I hear you when you say that we can make some modifications. So I'm open to that idea, because I'm also open to having that educational use expanded into those industrial zones for not just your facility. Without saying any more, that's an interest of mine. But I would just request that we have more time, that you work with Kristen, and we could get a better picture as to where we're going on some of these other issues besides yours, so that we can have a more universal approach and not a piecemeal type of approach. So I would just ask for your patience. That's just my personal view on that.
Any comments by the board?
I support this. I think it's a little bit more holistic look around the whole issue.
So we'll table it?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so, Mr. Jennings, can you walk us through the status of the historical ordinance?
With regard to the historical ordinance, all that I am aware of is the prior draft having the 4 categories designated historic properties and some potential deviation from that approach. Aside from that, there's not much more that I'm personally aware of.
Yeah, the current draft reduced it from 4 classes to 2, which means historic, National Register for Historic Places, or eligible, which reduces that list down substantially of properties. Correct.
Kevin is the chairman of the Historical Commission. I'd like to invite him up here to make a comment on it, if he would.
He looks reluctant.
Catched.
Hi. I'm the chairman of the Historical Commission. So right now, we do have a proposed ordinance out for having 2 classes of properties within the township. I've been talking with a few proposed consultants for the project, which also includes having an alternate class system where based on criteria rather than classes. So this would include things such as a historic event occurred here, or the property was designed by a famous architect. And I feel like this is going in a more modern direction. The class system based on the National Register of Historic Places, which I know from the state level, they're trying to get away from this because it's not as easily able to be defended on the local level. So if we encounter something, or if in the future we encounter something, it's more difficult to be using the class system based on the state level. So that's why some of the other townships are going more towards a criteria level system.
What's your progress on it, Kevin?
Right now, I'm still trying to come up with a proposal of what we can do. I know that some of the things that we've noticed within the Historical Commission, that we've noticed, right now we do have a list of historic resources, but not up to date. So one of our proposals is that we may need to do we may need to redo that and do a new evaluation. I'd rather do something like that so we have something from the beginning that's correct, rather than having a list that may not be correct or up to date.
When was that list done? 2012? Is it even that old?
Correct. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
But we've had a few houses that have been demolished. They're still on the list. We have gone through the list as a commission. We've noticed some houses that should have been on the list and are not on the list. So that's something that going over this list again might resolve those issues.
Ms. Kemp's recommendation was to put the list of properties as an addendum that can be easily modified by resolution as opposed to a portion of the ordinance. So that if the ordinance is drawn that way, then to change those properties is very simple, very easy, as opposed to leaving it in the ordinance. And you are correct, the ordinance portion, if they're included by ordinance, it's very difficult to change them. So we would, I would hope, go with the addendum procedure. And that could be easily processed at any point. We wouldn't have to hold up the whole process of doing it. We've been at this, almost a year now. So, yeah, maybe a year and a half. So hopefully we'll get it done here shortly.
Do you have any other comments on any other aspect of the ordinance or the commission?
Not at this time. So, do you have any questions about it?
Thanks for your work.
Yeah, and if there's any township staff can assist with this.
All right, thanks. Thanks.
So with your statement, Mr. Cornell, are you suggesting that we can vote on this ordinance as is, with the inventory being a separate task item that can be added? Or do we need to do this as one holistic?
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest we wait for the commission to get, because it's a definitely new way of thinking. If you've got a Frank Lloyd Wright house in the township, which we don't, I wish, it would be protected for two of it. It's a landmark for the building and a landmark because Frank Lloyd Wright designed it, or a high-end peg, or whomever.
That would be in addition to, or a section that would be added to the historical ordinance.
Right.
So, yes, that needs to be developed.
So the ordinance that you have in front of you would be a basis to then add that very selective criteria as well.
Okay,
to more
so
flesh it out. So we'll be working on it.
we've discussed it, and we're just going to continue to work on it.
Continue to work,
correct?
absolutely.
Okay, very good, thank you. Thank you for being here, Kevin, very helpful. Okay, item 21, public comment. Ms. May. Yes, come to the podium, please, thank you. Thank you for everyone in the audience who's just been waiting for this moment.
Angeline May. I have a letter that I'd like to read and then pass along to you. It's from the residents of Old Roslyn primarily that I've drafted. Dear Madam Chairperson and members of the board, we are grateful for your careful attention and interest in creating a Citizens Advisory Committee to provide insight into day-to-day issues and to help support your decision-making process as it relates to the PUC overlay, the possible exclusion of all residentials in any proposed overlay maps, and to generally identify solutions that address residents' concerns. We have proactively identified 5 residents listed below who are ready and willing to serve on the committee. We're eager to be of service to the township and to help support your work as our township leaders. So I'll pass this along to you, and I just wanted to, from the bottom of my heart and also expressed from my neighbors, our gratitude for your interest and care as you move forward on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Any other public comment? Ms. Swart.
I discovered recently that all of the woodlands at Greystone is going to be on propane gas. And I'm terribly kind of troubled for that, for those 598 new homeowners. Specifically, I live in a development of 12 units total, and we ended up in a similar situation where at closing you're presented a form to sign, and it locks you into propane for the next 50 years. This screenshot is off of the PICO website, and as you can see, there's a gas main that runs down Phoenixville Pike right to Sanders Lane. So there's existing natural gas mains right up to the main entrance of Woodlands at Greystone. In fact, their legend says natural gas potential. So the potential specifically right in the area where those 60 townhomes is high potential. I'm just wondering if there's a way the township might be able to intervene at this point and see if it's possible to require the developer to run natural gas at least to those 60 townhomes. I understand there's an expense involved, and of course that's why the developer would choose not to run natural gas, because it's cheaper, obviously, for them. But what also troubled me is that when these homeowners go to closing and they sign this agreement to be bound by buying their propane from one company, the company was created just a few months ago by the developer's partner. So not only we have a developer and an engineer that have been working on this development for a very long time, but also they are going to continue to fleece the residents, the new residents, and that troubles me. And I just hope that you will look into that and see how that happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swart. Okay. Please come forward.
Meg Diskin. This is just regarding the trash contract. I do think it might be worthwhile doing some type of poll of residents regarding whether once weekly trash pickup would be adequate. I, for one, would for my family. Our recycling can is much more full than our trash can, and it's usually the recycling that we run out of room for. And I think with an effort to educate citizens on how to properly recycle, it might be possible to reduce the amount of trash, so it only need to be picked up once a week as people increase their recycling. And I also wanted to say, on a personal note, that we received our toters about 3 years ago, I guess, when the contract was awarded. And when you're renewing that contract, I don't know if there are provisions for replacing or repairing toters. My toter has a cracked lid, and I just need to...
tomorrow and fix it. You need to contact our public works. They'll be up in a heartbeat.
I'm on it. It's on my list, my to-do list for tomorrow.
We're 64.
Okay, great. But I would like to see the township number one, look into once a week to save some money, and number two, of course, it benefits our environment if we can recycle more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just follow up. Do you have one recycling bin or do you have two? Because you are allowed to have.
Yeah, we will drop another, we'll drop a second one off if you like.
Oh, life-changing information.
So talk to Lisa tomorrow morning.
If you, yeah, when you contact, ask for two.
Absolutely. Because we offer unlimited recycling.
Great, thank you. Yes, Mrs. Gagne, come on up.
My name is Ashley Gagne. I'm going to kind of comment on what you were touching on with the trash. So I don't know if you are aware that there's the township community page, the Facebook page that's been created. You might follow it. And Margie mentioned earlier tonight that we had over 100 comments from citizens, but then there were also replies to those comments. And, you know, on that page, this agenda item was brought to people's attention. And, you know, I understand that, you know, your comments, Mr. Lalonde, about the trash trucks and their effect on our roads and everything like that. I'm not an expert as far as trash trucks and how they affect our roads, but I will tell you that a lot of people are in favor of the once per week thing. I think just it would be really helpful at the next meeting when you guys revisit this topic to have some kind of number in front of you that would tell township residents how much money would be saved if we move to a once per week trash pickup. And just a last comment, I also was not aware of the fact that we could have 2 recycling bins. Who knew?
We have discussed it many times at our public meeting.
I believe you. I believe you. But the more people that I'm talking to in our township, the more that I realize that people actually don't know a lot of things. So this is just another issue I think that we need to bring to our own attention about our communication with residents, and we need to get information out there in a better way. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Tracy?
Yes, sir.
Wasn't the last time that we interviewed for trash that whether it's once or twice a week, the price was?
There was about a 5% differential between once and twice a week. The trash company said they would need about 15 trash trucks on the given day, Monday, Thursday, whatever. They weigh 250,000 pounds, is that correct?
No.
Oh, that's right, yeah. They cost $250,000. Yeah. So just the effect on our roads, we prefer them twice a week than once a week.
I'm not a mathematician, but isn't it the same amount of trips on our roads, regardless of whether it's 15 trucks once a week or 7.5 trucks twice a week? Or am I missing something?
Just a lot more busy, and again, we floated the idea 2 contracts ago to go to once a week, and it was overwhelmingly negative to do once a week. I will take the board's discretion for the next contract period. We can't change right now unless we go out to full bid again, but the differential was 5%. And we didn't see it as a value to reduce our bill by 5% to eliminate, so we're reducing service essentially by doing that, so it wasn't worth it.
And in fact, we have bulk every
We have bulk every Thursday.
What about cutting the bulk down? I mean, I'm thinking outside the box.
You've got unintended consequences. We saw TVs being dumped all over the township. I would really worry if we did that, people would start dumping. We have people still dumping around the township. We all know that. There's unintended consequences of that experiment. I do not want to see sofas start piling up all over the township like we may. Mattresses, everything else. So
I'm just
kind of tricky.
thinking out loud. Somebody mentioned from the audience that they actually have more recyclables than trash.
True.
I find myself in that same situation. I'm wondering if a future trend would be 2 pickups for recyclables and 1 for trash.
Well,
my trash seems to be a lot less than
we
mine.
try to buffer that with the second toter. And our trash, you get 1 toter, that's it.
Right.
The recycling person will pick up as many recycling bins as they see.
Yeah.
So that's how we kind of guard against that. And you'd be adding more trucks into the township again with the second recycling. They're obviously totally separate equipment. So I was doing it twice a week.
Well, I was thinking it's trade-off, like 1 trash, 2 recycling, rather than 2 trash and 1 recycling.
Well, you're still collecting the same amount of trash, most likely.
don't you think of?
Something that can be looked into.
Sure. Yeah,
hopefully
we can look
through,
into that and see.
the work that Public Works does to negotiate those contracts. And start thinking about what our alternatives might be there. I don't know if there's a way that you can have it designated once a month or once a week versus the first family of multiple family members, exactly. So it's a little bit of a challenge in that respect. Okay, we're ready to close down the meeting. I know you wrote a letter asking to have public comment, but none of the items that you're speaking on, we are going to take advantage of your comments. You don't have standing any longer.
So you're refusing allowing me to speak in a public comment period, is that correct?
Correct, because
I have discovered dangerous condition in your building. I can bring it to your attention to your benefit.
you'd be happy, you'd be welcome to
And
do
just
that
for
by
we're
reaching
here
out.
50 hours a week. Please stop downstairs and we'll talk about it. I don't think it's really the board's time for you tonight.
Seems like you guys are afraid to allow me to speak in a public forum.
No, we're just following our rules related to public comment. And the items are not relevant to a personal impact to you, which is the main reason, if you are to speak here, you have to have standing.
I had a resident wrote a letter saying I speak in her behalf. Still you won't allow that, correct?
They have not finished going through it. And they're supposed to be told, as they told you at the last meeting, they would be speaking directly to your wife about her
Formal
accommodations.
stuff.
Formal life, okay. All right. Mr. Doug White would like to come up very quickly, please. Yeah, it's a last minute addition.
Doug White with Goshen. Just to respond to Marty's concern about the natural gas, I looked into this a little bit. The township really can't control that hazard, or in case I think I'm correct. We can't control.
I'm not going to comment on it.
Okay, but we can't tell the developer the utility that they can use.
We have no jurisdiction over anything. And Ms. Schwartz, PECO does have a service line on Saunders. It is way, way, way undersized to provide service to 600 homes. The developer would have had to increase the size of the pipe coming up from, from Paoli Pike all the way north. At a cost of several $1 million, they just didn't want to do it, and that's their right to do it. We don't have, it's a public utility commission matter, we have no jurisdiction over it.
Right. As long as they install them with the ionizing packs, they won't rust. And as far as requiring the homeowners to buy from that service provider, that's between them, and the homeowner has to make that decision. And who owns the tanks also. Sometimes the tanks are leased. So there's a lot of nuance when it comes to this propane. It's not necessarily something that the township, it'd be nice to get natural gas in there, but they have to dig up the property a lot more. Spring Lane has underground propane tanks. It's being done. It's not a bad thing necessarily, but the homeowners do have to realize that they'll have to buy them. Thank you.
All right, do I have a motion?
Oh, yes, we need a second.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Where's the second?
Good night, everybody. Thank you for being here.